welcome to this is the first episode of Travel Like a Superwoman. Our goal with this series is to bring you stories of travel, which Moonza is going to do for us today. We also are going to bring you tips and travel tricks and inside scoop on different resorts and places you can go. And so it just seemed like a perfect way to start this chapter, start this journey, is to hear a story. And like many stories, it's a couple blended together. So I don't want to even I will let us hear it from our guest herself. Welcome.
Thank you, Gillian. Thank you for having me. I'm really, really excited. And when you told me that this is about highlighting, females that are traveling alone, solo, I was like, yay, it's me. Come on, let's talk about this. Thank you for having me. And yeah, I want to share my story. And my story began about almost 10 years ago. This is in 2016, September. My mom had a stroke and she just a few days, or actually just a day before that, I met her and she was perfectly fine, no symptoms, nothing. And she had a stroke, and in her late 50s she was taken to the hospital. We realized some symptoms, and then she was admitted right away. I met her that night when she was admitted. It was almost very shocking for us. She did go into work that morning, so to see that transformation in that 12-hour window was just very, I don't know. I can't explain the symptoms. All I know is that it was a shock. And so I met her, and then 3 days later, I met her again. In 3 days' time, the progression of the stroke symptoms really went, from 0 to 100. When I met her 3 days later, when she was about to go for her surgery, they actually found a melanoma, on top of her skull, like a big, like around this size, and they had to remove that. Otherwise, it was going to penetrate the skull and paralysis would occur. So they had to do that surgery. And when I met her, from the time that I met her when she first got into the hospital to the time that she couldn't walk, she couldn't do anything. She wasn't able to speak. So she couldn't even, she was like there was parts of her face that were visibly not functional. So yeah, 8 hours later, had the surgery successfully, and then the journey of rehab started. And she was in the hospital for about 4 or 5 weeks, and then she went into in-house rehab, and she was there for a couple of months. And me, I wasn't working at the time, but I had a day home. I wasn't working professionally. I had taken a professional gap. And I had a day home. So in the daytime, and my kids were much younger. So in the daytime, I couldn't really visit her or meet up with her. So my go-to time was between 7 to 9, and go visit her and talk to her and actually massage her, her hands or her feet where she was hurting. About, a year later, she was home and recovering, but not really there. And I don't know what got into me. And I was like, I am headed in the same direction. Okay. You kind of almost it's like a flash in front of your eyes. I'm like, okay, this is going to be you. Right. So I decided that I was going to do something for my health. And so at the time, not having a lot of funds, I was like, running. And I've never been a runner, nothing. I don't even know where it came from. The only thing I can think of is that I thought it was one of the cheapest things to get into. Like, there was no gym membership involved. I had a pair of sneakers, cheapest thing to get into, and just go run outside. And that's what I did. I actually met with Running Room. I walked into Running Room. It's like one of those boutique stores that sells running apparel and shoes and things. And I said, okay, well, I see a sign and you guys have this run club. Can you tell me about it? And I think the rest is history. Pretty much, I joined the run club. I was, participating with them every Sunday, learning how to run. And the goal with which I walked in is interesting, because when I walked in, I said, I want to run a marathon in 6 months, having never even run a 5K. We do, yeah, I know, the very lofty, very, very lofty. And amazingly, none of them discouraged me. Everybody was like, okay, let's train. So it wasn't like, oh my God, I don't think you're ready for that. It was more like, let's train. And I think that mindset really helps. And when you're trying to get into something new, I look back and I'm like, if she had told me you aren't ready, if she had told me you can't do it, I think that's where it would have stopped. But when you get the kind of response that you get from people as you go along your journey really impacts the journey itself.
He touches on something we've been talking a lot about on the podcast is the power of your mind. The power of your, I say your body, but I mean your spiritual body, your invisible body, not your, your flesh and bones, that so often we let that stop us. Physically, we can do something, but we let our mind get ahead of us and say, no, you can't. And I love that you bring that up because that's something that I even have to keep reminding myself of things that I can do. Or I want to move something around the house and I think, oh, let me get someone to help me. No, I can, let me just try. I might can lift this. I might can do this. That kind of that defeatist mindset, I think can creep in so often. And so I love that you bring that up and that you had that experience. And it's kind of a good reminder for us to be that to ourselves and each other, to start the conversation, start the topic with something positive like that versus, yeah, girl, you 40, you're not going to run no marathon. I mean, that would have been a completely different conversation.
Exactly, exactly. And I don't think that's something, I mean, I didn't think about it at the time. You're just going with the flow. I think it's funny that how life is always retrospective. You can't really talk about it at the time because you don't know what that's going to lead into. It's just down the road you realize, wow, she really set me up for success because she didn't say no. She just said, yeah, let's train. And that was the right thing because I didn't know. And I had no idea. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to train for a marathon. And she said, just let's train. She didn't even say, let's do this and this. Down the road, when I met with them again and again on a weekly basis, I could only commit to one morning, right? Down the road, they were like, okay, so what are you doing? What are your goals? Are you just doing this for your health or is there a goal involved? Because everybody's coming from different places. And that's the other thing. You don't know where people are. You can't assume, you can't, and in order to guide them best, you want to meet them where they are, right? And that could be anybody. Like, and I think it's so critical, so vital to have that compassion to allow people to learn and grow.
Hmm.
That's what, yeah. So I did train and I did do a 5K April of that year. And I had just turned 40, so a week later, yeah, just about 8 days later, I did my first 5K. And then a month later, about 5, 6 weeks later, I did a 10K. And the goal had been that in 4 months, in September of that year, 2018, I would be doing a half marathon. A half marathon is 2K. So that was my goal. And so along the lines, I'm meeting people. Nobody in my family, friends, immediate circle knows anything what I'm doing. And I'm just going along with this thing. And I think it was just so uh, organic. There was not I feel like I wasn't even doing it. All I was doing was showing up. Like just like you said, like you show up and things sometimes just happen. And that is what I was doing. I was showing up. I was training every a regular basis, meeting people, learning from them, what they're doing, what kind of races they're doing and whatnot. And that led me to meet many, many people. So September 2018, 3 weeks prior to my half marathon, I had a friend who was a past coworker, and she was like, "Well, I'm going back to France." She was from France. We have a lot of international people that come to this part of the world. I live in Calgary, Alberta. And so she was going back and she's like, you're training for a half marathon. Why don't we go on a hike? And I say, yeah, yeah, I've been on a hike. And she's like, no, 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 an actual hike. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? So she took me on my first ever hike, not like a touristy place, not a place where, and it was 5 hours. And all I can think, up and down, all I can think is I came back and I fell in love with it. And I hiked one of it was like a hard mountain now that I know. We didn't make it to the top. What we covered is like, she told me things and she learned. She's like, "Oh, this is amazing. I've gone here a couple of times. It's close by." And I just fell in love with hiking that day. And I didn't make it to the top, like I said. I think I probably covered 2/3, no, 3/5, like around like less, a little bit more than half. And but it took me such a long time, but I learned so much. And then she was like, "Well, I'm going, but you join this Facebook group and you just meet people and people are always posting about so and so hike and just kind of carpool and learn and you'll figure it out." So I do my marathon and I actually get like a little injury in terms of my knee and stuff. But I finished the half marathon, but I take a little break. And after the break, I joined this Facebook group and I started hiking. So I met people like I posted and then I'm trying to say, "Hey, I'm a newbie. Can you tell me?" Just out of nowhere. And I'm meeting all these people. And lo and behold, 2019, I did 41 hikes. And so that's 28 end of 2018, 2019. I got into backpacking. I did my first ever backpacking and I did my I did 41 hikes. And then I started training for 2020 to do a full marathon. And so I did a full marathon in 2020 just to wrap up that whole story.
Just to check that box, as one does.
Yeah.
So for our listeners and for me, kind of define what is a hike. Well, what is a hike as separate from just a walk outside, and what is it that you fell in love with about hiking?
I still feel like I don't know what I felt. You felt very. I was struggling. Obviously, it was my first time I'm hiking. So a hike versus a walk, it involves a little bit of elevation. There's a little bit of distance. Obviously, when you're walking, there's also distance, but it could be isolated from the rest of the place. Oftentimes here in Calgary, Alberta, when you are hiking and you're hiking in the mountains, there is no reception. Like there is no phone reception. So you don't even have the ability to contact somebody. So that allows you to be really off the grid. It could be that. It could be the fact that my legs were hurting and I was still enjoying the scenery. I think I did feel like this is the first time I had been that high up in the mountains and to see that view that, oh my God, we have all these mountains and we always go and check places like Banff and Lake Louise, which are some of the most, beautiful places in Canada and in Western Canada in the Rocky Mountains. But I think I never experienced the closeness that the how close I got to the mountains and what I felt. I think it was like almost I don't want to call it a calling, but it almost felt like I was just at home. I was at peace. So yeah, maybe that's what it was. But
It's just getting away from all the like life distractions is what you really liked. And now you mentioned about backpacking. What would you define backpacking as different from hiking?
so at the time when I did backpacking in 2019, at the time we had been, we're really outdoorsy here. So we had tented and we have a trailer that we pull and we do camping in a trailer. So we had done all those things. What backpacking is that you pack everything in a pack and you carry it to the place where you're going to actually go and tent. So there's no cars that are going there. You're carrying all your stuff, and so everything is lightweight. You're carrying your tent, you're carrying your sleeping bag, your pad, and your food, and your stuff to cook your food. You're carrying your clothes. Everything is in one pack. And then you learn that what you need, what is essential, what exactly is, and then there's no water. Like you have to actually use the water from the streams and you need to kind of filter it. So there's a filter mechanism, right? And then you have to put your tent, and tent has to be in a place where you can tent because there's some designated places that allow you to be tenting and pitch your tent. We have a lot of bear safety here, so you want to be careful about bears. There's also sometimes designated areas where you can put all your food because these bears you're in their territory essentially. So you want to be respectful of that. They can. And you cannot just kind of say, oh, bears aren't allowed here. So we don't have that thing. It's a national park. There is no such thing as telling anybody that, hey, no bears are going to come over here. It's their territory. So they can come. And so when you're backpacking, essentially what you do is that you have a pack that you actually put up on the tree that nobody, so the bear can't get into it, and it's not in your tent. So there's some techniques of, that you learn along the way as backpacking, in different terrain. I'll talk about my, uh, you know, camping, tenting in different terrains in different areas where the bear safety is in there, but there's other things that are involved.
Yeah, I can totally. Before you and I got on and recorded, we were kind of talking about how you can pick up these, I don't want to say hobby, but you can pick up, and I saw some ladies online who started doing the shuffle dance during COVID, just as a way to kind of, keep their
Yeah.
energy or, yeah, do some aerobics type stuff but in their garage. And you would never think as a 12-year-old girl, I'm going to start doing the shuffle dance when I'm 40. And I bet there's some people who are listening who are like, I never thought get into hiking or backpacking because it's very much, at least for me, quite a departure from my everyday life. But listening to you talk about it, it's like, wow, okay, I can be open minded about this. I
Yeah.
can see the allure that you have, and I love that you have trusted yourself, given yourself permission to do something kind of outside the norm. Yeah, I don't hear many of my girlfriends they talk about their Pilates and their yoga. They don't talk about their backpacking and hanging things from a tree from a bear. So I'm glad that you talk about it. And that kind of then gets me thinking, how much of this do you do completely by yourself? And then how much of it are you kind of with a group, all just kind of moving along the path together on the hike?
So when we are hiking, and so hiking it can take different facets. It can take different, there could be solo hiking, there could be solo backpacking, and there could be group ones. Because we are in bear territory, it's actually recommended never to do it alone because you just don't want to be attacked. Like it's as much as we can think of it as funny that there's a bear chasing you, but there's really real fear that bears do attack. So they have recommended areas that you don't hike in certain places alone. You get fined basically if you're seen hiking, yeah, alone. Um and then some backpacking places, you do need more than 4 people. They say 4 people. I actually, funny enough, I don't know why it's four. Like, but the four is something that stucks into our head because we're like, oh, do we have 4 people when we go out? Or do we have 4 people when we're backpacking? So the backpacking that I have done in Canada and in my area has been with people. And the only time that I did it once on my own was there was a small, and I say small mountain, is me and my friends were gonna be doing something together and the plan fell through for her. And I had everything ready to go and I was gonna meet her. I was gonna drive for 2 hours. It was gonna be the next day was gonna be a stat holiday. I was all ready, and then she calls me and she was like, "The weather's turned around. I am not going." So I was like, "Okay, well, what do I do?" And so at the time, I was just learning and doing. This is back in I want to say 2020. I think it was July. And I said it was just for one night. Like, why can't we just still go? And then I got on a chat with my friend who's like, well, one of the things that you can do on your own, there's crown land camping. You can just go. There's no permits needed, just go and you can camp there. And so he gave me a name of I call it a hill now, but it is a mountain, really. Then it's like it was an hour and a half to get on top and then come back. So I'm like, oh yeah, that's just a hill. Hill. So I took my backpack, I camped there, and I pitched a tent on my own, and I stayed there for the night. There was like snow. There was a rainstorm that night, which is what we were trying to avoid in the other place. And then I just stuck it out. Got up in the morning, saw the sunrise, and then had some tea in my boiler and stuff, and packed up stuff, and I had packed some toast and things, like, nothing to really make,
Yeah.
and then so grabbed some stuff, nuts and things, and then headed back, and that was my solo adventure. Yeah.
So, what are you looking forward to like in the future? What hikes and what backpacking do you have planned?
So I wanted to get on this and talk about what led. So I started hiking in 2019. I did my full marathon in 2020. And then since then, I have still maintained running, but I had a couple of injuries. So when you have injuries, a knee injury, a tendonitis, things like that, what happens is that you're still keeping up with the fitness. And that was the thing that I learned, that you do keep up with the fitness in some other ways. So I started going to the gym, I started doing strength training, like things took a different turn. And then you go to physio, and then they show you stuff, and they're like, oh, do you have access to a gym? You can do these exercises. You can do weighted lunges and weighted squats. So you learn so much about your body and how to heal your body. So a lot of the things that I did along the way after through my marathon journey and after that were about healing. So as I talked about the 41 hikes that I did, I met one on one particular hike. I remember this very distinctly. It was like 2020, like 2019. And you're like, how do I remember this as if it was yesterday? I was coming down a mountain and a group of people, a family, was talking about Everest Base Camp. And they had just come from Everest Base Camp. And I was like, whoa, okay. So you look at these people and are like, so it's not just mountaineers that do Everest Base Camp. Normal people that are on this hike can also do Everest Base Camp. So that got my juices going. I'm from Pakistan and I have never been to the mountains up in my country. And Everest is the tallest mountain in the world, and K2 is the second highest mountain in the world, and that is in Pakistan. I had never in my wildest dreams or ever thought that I would be thinking about going to that region. I'd never gone. And I said, okay, well, I would like to actually go to K2 Base Camp. And I started looking into how I could make that journey possible. Mm, I know I wasn't a mountaineer, I wasn't going to go on top or anything, but base camp is something that stuck with me. And then I started looking into it. So it took me about 2 years from 2021 to 2020 three to plan my 14-day trek as my first international multi-day trek outside of Canada. And so that was K2 Base Camp. So it was a 14-day trek as my first time ever that I took upon. We did 8 days there, 6 days back. Yeah. And I went alone from Canada. Again, one of the things that you don't really think about because you're like, well, I'll go with a group, I'll go with friends I know, I'll go with people I know. And I just said, well, I don't know who else wants to go, but I want to go. So I don't know. I'm like, I want to go. I'm not worried about anybody else. And yeah, it took a lot of learning, coaxing, planning. I have family. I have two boys. My son is 20 and my younger one's 16. I'm married, and so like my parents are here and they're like, "What is this girl doing?" I try to convince them that I was doing nothing stupid, crazy. Uh yeah, that's so I went on a 14-day trek. We're still so like we are so close. The group that I went with, it was an international group. There was one person from Germany, one person from Taiwan, one person from Italy, two people from Macedonia, and then I was a Canadian. So we were an international group. And it's so interesting, Jillian. You meet, I earlier talked about earlier in your journey, in my running journey, I met people that were so inviting, so encouraging. Similarly, to this day, it's been 3 years, and every couple of months, people like to share what they're doing, what they're involved in their own countries, or if they're doing international travel. And it really motivates. Like it just gets you, thinking about, oh, this is possible. Oh, this is possible. Like it just opens doors like anything. And so I met all these people, and you came across the trek that I'm about to do in at the end of August. I met a girl that actually talked about it there on a separate group. So I did go alone and I met with a group, but I think there is so much liberation in going alone, I think. And then it gives you confidence that you're able to, take on this thing. You're able to go on to a different place and take it on. So I did so I did the 14-day trek in 2023. In 2024, I went to Peru by myself and I did Machu Picchu, which was a 4-day trek. And in 2025, which was last year, I went to Africa, Kilimanjaro, and I summited Kilimanjaro.
Imagine what your scrapbook looks like.
I don't know. It's in the process. I don't even know what it looks like because, and that's the funny thing. I Lots of people are like, "Well, you're on Instagram. I don't see any of these things." And I just post one picture because it's never about. I can't talk about it. Like I don't know what to talk about it. It's just some of it is beyond words, right? It's an experience. It's an experience. Yeah.
Love that. And I love that you share just that you can do something new, even when you're 40. You can take it to the highest level, I mean, pun intended, and multiple times and, do that by yourself. I love all those components of your story that you shared. I'm sitting here like, yes, I would like more photos or, or have a drone or a GoPro or something that we could because I definitely would never have the thought of carrying all my stuff, that would be that right there has got me. Um, and I'm flashing back, there was a movie, well, it was a book and then a movie with, I think, Reese Witherspoon, or I can't remember who it was.
Yes. Yeah.
She puts the
And so she
backpack up.
did
That's what I'm thinking of.
She Yeah, exactly. So she did the Pacific Coast Trail, which is also on my list at some point. I don't know when that's going to happen. That's a long that a lot more many days to tackle. A lot of people do the West Coast Trail, which is in Vancouver in Alberta, so in Canada. Not sorry, not in Alberta, but in Canada on the West Coast. It's British Columbia. And West Coast Trail is similar to the Pacific Coast Trail because Pacific Coast Trail is along the lines of California and that region, right? But the West Coast Trail is for the Canadians and then they going over Vancouver Island. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The interesting thing is, so far I have always joined a guided group. So what that means is that I go from here, I make all the arrangements and they handle so backpacking for sure. You have to carry everything, and I've done so many backpacking as a prep. You have to carry your things and everything you have to carry, you're responsible. The thing with these guided treks that I have done, all three that I mentioned, the K2 base camp, the Machu Picchu trek, and the Kilimanjaro trek, they are guided treks. And those guided treks, you have porters, you have a guide, so you have a little bit of a flexibility. You do pay them because they are paid. They handle your food and they may be putting up your tent and everything, but you carry your 20-pound bag. So, but you're doing that for sometimes 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours. So you want to be mindful of what you can carry, right? So that piece is helpful. Down the road, I do have it I think in my list to do one where I am solo backpacking. And that'll be an international one as well, not here because I've already done one here. So it has to be something new, something I haven't done. Right. So yeah, so we'll see how that goes.
Story, and I love how it, started with your mother and then went to fitness and then to find this just physical and mental happy place for you with hiking. And I love that you shared the story. What do you want to leave our listeners with today?
I feel like my story is still being written. And I feel like that is true for a lot of us. I think we tend to, when some things happen, when things, doors close, or, we feel like it's all done, right? Or maybe it's an age. I'm this age, so I'm done. Or, this has happened and I'm done. I lost my job, this is done. Or I think what I want to really leave the listeners is there is no done. There's done when you're done, which is when you're 6 feet under, right? So it's not done until then. And I think that's the thing that we want to keep. My story is still being written. I don't know what is, I have all these, I would like these plans. I want to do this and I want to travel and I want to trek in many different countries. But at the same time, it's not done.
And I love that you still I think most people I'm speaking for myself, if I just did K2, I'd be like, "Okay, cool, I'm done. I'm good. I've executed the hiking thing." But love that you're continuing to set goals and to stretch those goals, meaning like doing it by yourself versus on, a guided. And, as you improve with your skill and your confidence, you're continuing to not let yourself, I don't want to say get lazy, but stay static. You're still pushing forward. And I love that example that you share.
Yeah, and you know what? I think we all need to do that in all realms of our lives because otherwise, if the goalpost is not there, if you don't have something to strive for or push yourself, I think then you're not going to really do it. Like, I wouldn't be caring so much about my fitness if I knew that I didn't have to be fit for a certain hike. It's really hard, and it gets harder and harder as a 45 plus, to kind of motivate yourself that why are you going to get up at 6 o'clock and go for a run? Why are you going to get up at, 5:30 and go and drive and go on a hike that's going to be for 12 hours? Why would you do that? Like, you could be sleeping. You already work 5 days a week, 6 days a week. You're already, a busy household, whatever. But I think it's the goalpost that always keeps you motivated and tells you why you need to do what you need to do. Or why you're doing what you're doing. So, yeah.
Your socials for your one photo that you share for each hike. We will drop our socials in the show notes for our listeners here so they can find you online
Yes.
and cheer you on and support your story. But I so appreciate you coming on today and sharing this and opening our mind to so many different things, so many different ways to approach life with kind of under the shingle of it's not done. It's still, you can keep writing your story until the very end. I love that.
That is so true. Yeah. And you learn so much from each people. Like, I learned so much from the African people. I learned so much from the people in Peru. So I think every place that you go to, I know for a lot of people, learning is you travel and you learn. And that is amazing. I think that is wonderful. But I think for me, I found a different way of learning about the world that we live in.
And that's the perfect place to leave this. Thank y'all so much.
Okay.